Accidents can happen to anyone, and sometimes in the weirdest ways. In this video, we're sharing 5 real stories of people who tragically lost their lives in some pretty bizarre circumstances. These tales are a big reminder of how unpredictable life can be, and how something as simple as a random action can lead to a tragedy you'd never see coming. Get ready for some jaw-dropping moments that will leave you thinking twice about the small things in life. It was a quiet, unassuming night in Caratinga, a small town nestled in southeastern Brazil. Life here was simple, almost uneventful, and for João Maria de Souza, a 45-year-old man, this night seemed no different. He lay soundly asleep beside his wife, Lenny, in their modest home at the base of a steep hill. But destiny, it seemed, had other plans. The date was July 2013, and as the couple slumbered peacefully, an unusual chain of events unfolded just beyond their knowledge. A massive, 1-ton cow had escaped from a nearby farm. It wandered aimlessly under the cover of darkness, its heavy steps muffled by the quiet of the town. Drawn inexplicably to their property, the animal climbed onto the roof of João's house, a roof made of fragile corrugated iron, never meant to support such weight. The silence of the night shattered in an instant. With a deafening crash, the roof gave way, and the enormous cow plummeted into their bedroom. Chaos erupted as João's side of the bed bore the brunt of the impact. Lenny woke to a nightmare, a massive animal thrashing amidst the ruins of their ceiling, her husband pinned beneath its bulk. Miraculously, Lenny emerged unscathed, and even the cow survived the bizarre fall without injury. João, however, lay trapped, groaning in pain but conscious. The scene was surreal. Debris littered the floor, and João's breaths came in short, strained gasps. Emergency services arrived swiftly, extracting João from the wreckage. Though in immense pain, he remained lucid as he was rushed to the hospital. A fractured leg appeared to be the extent of his injuries. A stroke of fortune, considering the absurdity of the accident. His family clung to hope, believing the worst was behind them. But fate had one more cruel twist to deliver. At the hospital, João's condition began to deteriorate unexpectedly. What seemed at first to be a survivable ordeal spiraled into a medical tragedy. Hours ticked by as João awaited proper examination, his family growing increasingly desperate. Internal bleeding worsened, and their hope turned to anguish. By the time doctors finally attended to him, it was too late. João succumbed to his injuries, leaving his loved ones devastated and enraged. Being crushed by a cow in your own bed, that's no way for anyone to go, his grieving brother-in-law lamented to the press. His mother, inconsolable, spoke of the bitter irony. I fought to save him when he was a child, only for him to die like this. It's unbearable. The local police launched an investigation, determined to uncover the answers to a cascade of questions. Who owned the cow? How did it escape? And most haunting of all, could this tragedy have been avoided? Photos of the aftermath, a gaping hole in the roof, João's grieving family standing beside his coffin, painted a harrowing picture of a life cut short in the most bizarre of circumstances. For João's family, the bizarre accident was compounded by their fury at the healthcare system's delays. To them, it wasn't just the cow that claimed João's life, it was negligence, both human and systemic. In this quiet town, what began as an ordinary night ended in a tragedy so strange and cruel that it defied belief, leaving behind echoes of grief, anger, and unanswered questions. September 23, 2017. The air was crisp in the Welsh countryside, and Elizabeth Isherwood, a 60-year-old former police officer, arrived at the Plas Talgarth holiday complex near Machynlleth, Wales, ready for a peaceful retreat. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a final farewell to the family timeshare her loved ones had recently sold. But what was meant to be a quiet week of reflection and relaxation turned into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Elizabeth would never make it back home. Elizabeth, known as Mary to those closest to her, was vibrant, fit, and full of life. A grandmother who adored her grandchildren, she was the type of person who had seen the world, embraced its challenges, and met them head-on. From her days as a police officer to her more recent work as a carer, she thrived in helping others. But on her first night at Plas Talgarth, fate trapped her in a horrifying struggle for survival. Sometime in the middle of the night, Elizabeth rose from her bed, disoriented in the unfamiliar surroundings. She mistakenly opened the door to the airing cupboard instead of the ensuite bathroom. A faulty door handle snapped behind her, locking her in the small, suffocating space. Clad only in her skin, she was now a prisoner in a dark, narrow cupboard, isolated from the world. Panic set in. Elizabeth fought with every ounce of her strength. Hours passed as she clawed at the walls, desperate for an escape. She broke a pipe in her frantic struggle, hoping to use it as a tool to break free. Instead, water sprayed relentlessly, drenching her and hastening the onset of hypothermia. Her body trembled as the cold seeped into her bones, but she refused to give up. With sheer determination, Elizabeth managed to punch through the plasterboard wall. Relief must have surged through her as she saw daylight, only to find that the hole she created was blocked by a picture frame screwed to the wall on the other side. Her cries for help echoed through the building, muffled and misunderstood. A couple staying nearby heard the banging, but dismissed it as maintenance work. Their decision to wait until morning to report it sealed Elizabeth's fate. By 5 p.m. the following day, all went silent. The banging stopped, the cries faded, and Elizabeth's fight came to a heartbreaking end. She succumbed to hypothermia, her exhausted body unable to endure the brutal cold any longer. It wasn't until a week later, on the day Elizabeth was supposed to check out, that staff discovered her lifeless body. She had never even unpacked her suitcase. The scene told the story of her final moments, a tale of resilience and unimaginable suffering. For her son, Craig, and her ex-husband, Clive, the news was shattering. Craig, faced with the impossible task of explaining the tragedy to Elizabeth's beloved grandchildren, described it as the hardest conversation of his life. The family was not only grief-stricken but angry. How could a faulty door handle and a lack of proper maintenance lead to such a horrific death? The inquest ruled Elizabeth's death a misadventure, but to her loved ones, it was a preventable tragedy. Craig took legal action against the resort, not for financial gain but to ensure no other family would endure such heartache. The fight wasn't just for justice, it was for Elizabeth's legacy, a woman who deserved so much more than to be forgotten as a casualty of negligence. Elizabeth's story is a stark reminder of how quickly the ordinary can turn deadly, how a single moment of oversight can spiral into a devastating loss. It urges us to demand better safety measures, to advocate for accountability, and to honor those who, like Elizabeth, fought with every breath to survive against impossible odds. It was January 27, 2018, a day that began like any other at Nair Hospital in Mumbai but would soon descend into tragedy. Rajesh Maru, a 32-year-old man from Lalbagh, walked into the hospital not knowing he was taking his final steps. A devoted son, a caring friend, and a man known for his helpful nature, Rajesh was there to assist his brother-in-law's ailing mother, Laxmibai Solanki, who urgently needed an MRI scan. The hospital's hallways buzzed with routine activity as Rajesh, alongside his brother-in-law Harish, wheeled Laxmibai towards the MRI section. There, a staff member issued a familiar warning: no metal objects beyond this point. The powerful magnetic field of an MRI machine could turn even the smallest metallic item into a deadly projectile. Rajesh, cautious by nature, removed all metal from his person. But then came a fateful request. A ward boy, Vithal Shavan, handed Rajesh an oxygen cylinder and instructed him to bring it inside the MRI room. Rajesh hesitated, his instincts screaming against it. "Is the machine turned off?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. The ward boy waved off his fears, replying with an air of confidence, "This is our daily work, don't worry." Trusting the hospital staff, Rajesh stepped into the MRI room with the cylinder in hand. Within seconds, his life spiraled into a nightmare. The MRI machine, still operational, roared to life as its magnetic field grabbed the metal cylinder with ferocious force. Rajesh was yanked forward as if by an invisible hand, his body slamming into the machine. His hand, still clutching the cylinder, became trapped between the machine and the massive object. In the chaos, the cylinder's flow meter shattered, releasing liquid oxygen that sprayed onto Rajesh's face and into the room. The scene was pandemonium. Harish and the ward boy rushed to free Rajesh, but the magnetic pull was unrelenting. In the struggle, Rajesh's left index finger was severed. Panic turned to horror as Rajesh gasped for air, the excessive inhalation of oxygen suffocating him rather than saving him. Rajesh was rushed to the trauma center, but it was too late. By the time he reached the emergency ward, he was gone. The hospital fell into stunned silence as news of Rajesh's death spread. His father, Gulab Maru, arrived, his face etched with grief and disbelief. "How could this happen? How could such negligence take my son's life?" he cried, his voice breaking under the weight of his loss. The MRI room, now a crime scene, revealed the grim reality of a system that had failed catastrophically. Police quickly arrested Dr. Siddhant Andhera, ward boy Vital Shavan, and another staff member, Sunita Survey, charged them with causing death by negligence under Section 304A of the Indian Penal Code. An internal investigation was launched, and representatives from Philips, the MRI machine manufacturer, were called in to inspect the site. As the Maru family prepared to cremate Rajesh, their grief was compounded. Laxmibai, the very person Rajesh had died trying to help, succumbed to her illness days later. But even in death, Rajesh's ordeal wasn't over. His severed finger, a crucial part of Hindu last rites, remained trapped in the MRI machine for days. When it was finally removed, it was sent to a forensic laboratory, where it would remain for 18 months. For the family, the wait was an agonizing reminder of their loss. They made countless trips to the hospital and police station, fighting bureaucracy to retrieve the finger. Only on June 20th, 2019, were they able to claim it and perform Rajesh's final rites. Standing by the waters at Worli, they scattered his ashes, hoping to find a sliver of peace amid the torment. The tragedy sparked outrage across Mumbai. How could a hospital, a place of healing, become the site of such a horrifying death? Negligence and lax safety protocols had cost Rajesh his life, and his family was left not only grieving but battling for justice. Local politicians promised compensation, but the Maru family alleged that even those promises went unfulfilled. "This wasn't just an accident," said a devastated Harish. "It was a preventable tragedy, one caused by carelessness and indifference." Rajesh Maru's death stands as a chilling reminder of the catastrophic consequences of negligence. His story is not just one of loss, but of the urgent need for accountability, safety, and respect for human life. It was November 3rd, 2014, in Jersey City, New Jersey, a brisk, ordinary morning as the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. Gary Anderson, a 58-year-old delivery man from Summerdale, set off to work, unaware that this day would end in unspeakable tragedy. His destination was a high-rise construction site on Christopher Columbus Drive, where two towering 50-story residential buildings and a hotel were being built. For Gary, it was just another day on the job, but fate had other plans. Gary was known for his reliability and strong work ethic. His truck, boldly marked with the phrase, "Owned by God," reflected the deep faith that guided his life. He was well liked by colleagues and cherished by his family, his wife and daughters, who were his world. But on this day, a small, seemingly insignificant mistake would set off a chain of events leading to devastating consequences. By 9 a.m., the construction site was alive with activity, workers shouting over the hum of machinery. Gary parked his truck near the site, preparing to deliver drywall. His hard hat, a critical piece of safety gear, sat forgotten in his car. Nearby, on the 50th floor, high above the bustling chaos below, a construction worker adjusted his tool belt. Among the tools was a simple, 1-pound tape measure, dangling precariously. Then, it happened. The tape measure slipped free. It began its descent from the 50th floor, accelerating rapidly. Nearly 500 feet below, Gary was leaning into the window of a pickup truck, chatting casually with a colleague. He had no idea that death was hurtling toward him at over 140 miles per hour. The tape measure, now a lethal projectile, struck a piece of construction equipment about 15 feet above the ground. The deflection altered its path, but not its deadly speed. It ricocheted downward and straight into Gary's head. The impact was catastrophic. Gary collapsed instantly, unconscious before his body hit the ground. Chaos erupted. Workers rushed to his side, their shouts mingling with the wail of approaching sirens. An ambulance arrived swiftly, and Gary was rushed to Jersey City Medical Center, but the damage was too severe. Despite the efforts of emergency staff, Gary went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead at 9:52 a.m. His wife and daughters, who had rushed to the hospital, were met with the unimaginable news. Gary, their rock, their protector, was gone. The construction site fell silent in the wake of the tragedy. Gary's colleague, who had been speaking with him moments before the accident, was in shock. "It's terrifying," he muttered. "I had no idea something so small could do so much damage." Nearby, workers echoed the sentiment, their faces pale with the stark realization that a single oversight could claim a life in an instant. Safety discussions quickly followed. "You don't work in this environment without a hard hat," a former construction worker remarked. Yet, even with a hard hat, experts later noted, Gary's chances of survival were slim against the sheer speed and force of the falling object. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, launched an investigation, scrutinizing the site's safety protocols. How had a simple tool fallen? Could this have been prevented? The site was temporarily shut down, but for Gary's family, no investigation could bring back the man they loved. Gary's colleagues remembered him as a devout, hardworking man. Just before the accident, he had been telling a story and uttered the words, "God is good." Now, those words carried an eerie resonance, a reminder of how fragile life is. This tragedy was a chilling testament to the unpredictability of life and the grave dangers that can lurk in even the most routine tasks. For Gary's family, the loss was not just a headline, but an unbearable void. And for the construction workers left behind, his death served as a somber warning. Even the smallest mistakes can carry the weight of tragedy. On the morning of September 24, 1980, John Bonham, the legendary drummer of Led Zeppelin, woke up to what should have been a day of excitement. The band was gearing up for their first tour in 3 years, a chance to reignite their dominance over the rock world. Yet beneath the anticipation lay the storm of Bonham's struggles, a storm that would lead to one of the darkest days in music history. Bonham, affectionately known as Bonzo, was no stranger to excess. His larger-than-life personality extended far beyond his unparalleled drumming. That morning, as Led Zeppelin's assistant Rex King picked him up, the tone for the day was set. At breakfast, Bonham knocked back 4 powerful vodkas before the first rehearsal note had even been played. The band convened at guitarist Jimmy Page's home in Bray, England, a tranquil village that masked the turmoil brewing within Bonham. The day unfolded with rehearsals, laughter, and camaraderie, but Bonham's drinking escalated. Each hour brought another glass, and each glass brought him closer to the edge. By evening, his movements were unsteady, his speech slurred, a shadow of the man who commanded drum kits with thunderous precision. As the day waned, concern grew among his bandmates. They were used to Bonham's indulgences, but this was different. When the night ended, they made the fateful decision to put him to bed in one of Page's spare rooms, carefully laying him on his side to prevent the worst from happening. It was a precaution born of experience, but this time, it wouldn't be enough. Morning came, September 25th, 1980. The house was still and eerily quiet. At 1:45 p.m., Led Zeppelin's road manager, Ben Lefebvre, went to check on Bonham. He knocked, called out, and finally pushed open the door. What he found would haunt him forever. Bonham lay motionless, his face pale, his body unnaturally still. Lefebvre tried to rouse him, shaking him gently at first, then frantically. Desperation set in as he searched for a pulse, but there was none. Panic swept over him as he called for help, but when the ambulance arrived, it was already too late. At just 32 years old, John Bonham, the heartbeat of Led Zeppelin, was gone. The cause of death was grimly fitting for the lifestyle he led: pulmonary aspiration. Bonham had choked on his own vomit, a result of consuming an almost unimaginable amount of alcohol, equivalent to 40 shots of vodka over 12 hours. According to Dr. Edmund Hempstead, Bonham's body had gone into shock, his liver overwhelmed by the relentless tide of toxins. Death hadn't come swiftly. It had stalked him for hours, quietly and inexorably. The news sent shockwaves through the music world. Bonham wasn't just a drummer, he was a force of nature. His innovative, thunderous style had redefined what rock drumming could be, leaving an indelible mark on countless musicians. His death didn't just end a life, it fractured a band that had come to symbolize an era. In the weeks that followed, the remaining members of Led Zeppelin wrestled with an impossible question. Could they go on without him? By December 4th, 1980, their answer was clear. In a simple, heart-wrenching statement, they announced the band's dissolution, citing their profound respect for Bonham's memory and the bond that could never be replaced. Fans mourned not only Bonham, but the end of Led Zeppelin, a band that had ruled the 1970s with an iron grip on the rock world. In the years that followed, brief reunions teased what might have been, most notably at the 2007 O2 Arena show immortalized in Celebration Day. But Led Zeppelin, as it once was, would never return. The loss of John Bonham remains one of rock's great tragedies. His drumming, immortalized in songs like Kashmir and When the Levee Breaks, continues to inspire, a testament to his unmatched genius. Yet his death raises questions that linger to this day. What if he had drunk less? Could his bandmates have done more to intervene? Would Led Zeppelin have soared higher, rewriting rock history? We will never know. What remains is the legacy of a drummer who gave everything to his craft and paid the ultimate price. John Bonham's life was as intense and electrifying as the music he created, and his death stands as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk behind the glimmering facade of rock stardom.